This is Coaching as Benevolence, a podcast for people who are curious about using coaching for self-development. I'm Eryn with Roots and Wings Grief and Loss Coaching.
And I'm L'Shawn with Michelle Sage Place Positive Intelligence Coaching.
Today we're going to be talking about tapping into what is going well and really drawing from that inner wisdom of our strengths and maybe connections that we've made, as well as ways we've been motivating ourselves to, live the life that we want to live. And I know throughout this season, we have focused a lot on some of the key challenges of navigating, difficult emotions, for instance. And so we thought today it might be nice to kind of flip that and consider how we root into what is going well and how we can use that as a tool in our toolbox to do what we want and need to do, especially this time of year where it might be winter for some people, very cold. And these days, in the long winter season tend to sometimes feel a little bit more challenging. So it can be hard to remember what's going well. And there is a lot of things going really well in my life and other people's lives to really look at as a tool for positive thinking and responding well when things do go well. I know I find myself sometimes, if something is going really well, really just thinking or waiting for something not to, or for that other shoe to drop, without really taking that time to embrace the goodness that there is and really rooting into that. So, L'Shawn, I'll pass it over to you for where you want to start this conversation with, how you might tap into what's going well in your own life.
I think this is such a good topic because it's easy at the beginning of a new year to think about like your resolutions. What are you going to do differently? What are you going to do better? What are you going to accomplish in the new year? And I think it's really easy to look at the things that are lacking or the things that you want to improve, rather than look at what's been working for you. And when we go from a place of, this is what's going well, this is what I'm doing well, this is where I am accomplished, or this is my strength, or this is something I appreciate about my life, it adds more levity in your life. And it also allows you to come from a positive place. And it also comes from a place of capability, competence, going from what I do have and adding more. And I really want to invite the listeners to look at it from that point of, if you ask yourself, where am I lacking, or what can I do better? As opposed to saying, I have this, how can I add to it? How can I expand? How can I do more of that? And see how that feels. Where does that land for you when you ask from that position of looking at it more of an abundance, or things that you do have and how you can add to it? Personally, when I look at what I do well and I think, how can I expand that, or how can I do more of that, or what can I add to that? It feels more encouraging than, I don't do this well. How can I do it better? It's a little different feeling. So I do think that there is a lot of value to looking at and rooting into, to use your words, Eryn, what we do well. And, where do we start? And one thing that I do is, look at things that I appreciate, things that I like about my life. And then from there, I can think about what I would like to do in addition to that, or what I would like to do more of. So that's something that I think is really important, to get that balance when you're looking at your New Year's resolutions, or you're looking at ways that you can improve your life. Eryn, what thoughts do you have?
I really like how you frame that. And I'm also thinking, when we can kind of really discover what's going well for ourselves and grow that can be a moment of, going back to our growth zone episode, right? It may not feel the easiest sometimes, even though it's looking at what's good, right? So there's always a little bit of that paradox in there, which I think can be a little bit of a challenge as well. But before, jumping all the way to that, When I think of like list making, I don't love to make lists for certain things, but I do think this is a good one to potentially try list 4. So even let's say you are struggling to come up with what's going well in your life, maybe you could just list whatever's coming to mind, things that are happening in your life. And for those that you might see as maybe less neutral and more negative or not helpful, what is the gift within that? So for instance, maybe it's an interaction with a difficult person. What is the gift in that that's going well? What can you take away from that to improve your own life? And then as you start to maybe grapple with some of those things that are really showing up for you, if you're thinking of those first, those things that aren't going well, maybe you'll start to expand more into what really is going well. So then on the other hand, in another list, what is going well? And if it takes time to really come up with some things, that's okay. I think people start to panic if it's like 30 seconds and they can't think of something that's going well, but 5 minutes even, and just getting a list of a few items. And that can be a good reminder of, what's going well. And then when you start to recognize that, you can start to ask those curious questions. Why is this going well? What would make this go better? Who's been helping me with this? How can I express gratitude around this to them? I think if those positive meaning questions are tied to those things that are going well, I think that really opens up some space in our lives to express more gratitude, feel more grounded, and also feel maybe less panicked. Yes, we've got this. No matter, the rocky season we might be in, we do see that these things are going well and that these gifts from things that maybe aren't going well are a way for things to go well. And, when we're in different parts of our lives or different seasons within a year of our life, these questions might come up a little bit better at some point for people than at others, and that's okay. We want to stay away from like that forced positivity, but we also don't want to get drug under in this negative culture that gets perpetuated from constant critique and constant kind of gotcha behavior like social media kind of expounds. So that's where I think we can really maybe make some headway is when we notice both the things that are going well and tending to those, and then the things that maybe aren't going well and finding the gifts in those too. L'Shawn, what have you tried maybe? What's worked for you?
I like that you mentioned finding the gifts and opportunities in things that aren't going well. I think that when we focus on what are we learning? That's one thing I think that you did bring up in a previous episode where rather than looking at, things that are going wrong and things that are going wrong, you could ask like, what have I learned or what am I learning? And that is one of the things that I think I use when I am looking at what I do well or what my strengths are. So one thing that I do is whenever I do something new, whenever I am stepping into a new role, I often go back to when I first started teaching English as a second or foreign language. And I was doing a graduate fellowship where I was teaching at an intensive English program. And I remember when I first taught grammar to the second level students. And I really struggled with it because there are things as a first language English speaker, I acquired the language, therefore I don't know certain things, so I take those for granted. And so when you're teaching your own language and you're teaching your first language, there are certain ways that you frame things that can be understandable for the students. And I was learning, and I was having an evaluation. It was an observation from my supervisor, and she actually had to coach me through teaching this concept. And as a result, my students, being so candid, they said, the teacher should take grammar, not teach grammar. So I just remember that moment. At first, it was really difficult for me. It was hard to get that evaluation. Then I remember when I went back to teaching that same class the following semester after having had that experience where my students said, I was terrible at grammar. I shouldn't be teaching grammar. And then getting an evaluation where my students were like, I really understood grammar better. I appreciate what the teacher did. It was so different, day and night. And so what I do is I always go back to that and I remind myself when I do things for the first time, I usually am not very good at it. So I tell myself, hey, do you remember when you were teaching grammar for the first time that you were able to get better? And so I go back to that moment in my teaching career where I did not teach grammar well, but I say to myself, you do learn, you are a good learner. And so that's one way that I look at my strengths. As an individual, I'm a good learner. And I know that if I start something, that it's not always going to be the best, but I get better as I go. And so I can go back to that moment in the past and know that that is an example of overcoming something. That is an example of developing as a teacher. Now, I have a very good grasp on teaching grammar, having done it for over a decade. So it's an easier thing for me, but it didn't used to be. And so I tell myself, hey, you're stepping into a new role and there's going to be unknowns and it's okay because you can do this. You have an example from the past where you did do this. And so that's one way that I look at my own growth and how I learn and how I encourage myself when stepping into a new role. Eryn, how about you? Do you have a strategy that you use or any example like that you can share with our listeners?
I love your story and it feels so empowered and it's kind of different from when I started my career out, first teaching. And I did not take that learner's mindset. I just always felt like nothing was ever good enough. No matter how hard I tried or what I tried, I just always was like, I don't know what I'm doing. And that was like one of the first times I felt that way. And unfortunately, I never, ever in the beginning of my career there thought to tap into, what's going well here. There are things that are going well. And so I am a little bit newer to this concept of being okay with wherever I'm at in the process and then tapping into what's going well. And I think that part for me is a lot about feeling now too. I think I used to really suppress those feelings of like, oh, this is going really well, or because I just was waiting for something else to fail, right? Whereas now if I can sit with those feelings of those positive states of things going well, I can hold them with more appreciation, and not only for myself, but for others who are supporting me through the process and the creative aspect of the work itself too. So for me, I cut off those feelings and probably those positive feelings, for instance, and probably out of habit in some ways, out of the way that I was cultured and the way that the schooling had kind of led me to think and feel. And I didn't know, really, truly, deep down, this would have been like almost 20 years ago now. I didn't know that I could have a consistent state of those positive feelings and do what I wanted, really tap into my creative process, which is something that helps with my well-being and tapping into what's going well for me. So if anybody is, listening out there thinking that they don't have a pathway to feel positivity towards themselves or others or their situation, there is, and it can be hard to see it in the moment when you're really stuck in this kind of false thinking of negativity. And oftentimes we don't notice it until we start to become more aware of it through therapy or forced life situations or whatever it may be. So, looking back over those past 20 years, a lot has shifted in my life in terms of what I can root into what's going well. And for me, one of the two key things for me that have worked over the past 10 years have been tapping into my creative process. And that shows up in many ways, whether that's writing or the podcast or through art or things like that. And then tapping into connection with others. And so that includes, the friends in the community that I have, the work and the volunteer work that I do in the community. Those types of things have helped me remember those positive ways that I can feel and think about myself and the world and still hold space for critique, right? But not get so dragged under by it that I don't hold space for what's going well too. So for me, it's been learning that balancing act and then tapping into creativity and community. L'Shawn, what do you want to add here?
I love what you said about in the past that you were unable to feel and experience those positive emotions, and that tendency to look at what's not going well or not it not being good enough, and just really focusing on that point when it would be good enough. And so that you were looking at the results rather than the process itself. And I really like that you brought that up, because I think that's so important to bring to mind when we're looking at the things that go well. So if we allow ourselves to experience, like you said, you are tapping into your creativity, you are tapping into the connections that you make in the community and the things that you do in the community, and you're allowing yourself that experiencing those positive and fulfilling and life affirming emotions and experiences that I think fuel us. And I think that's what gives us the motivation. It can give us the motivation to do more and to be more connected. It's a positive reinforcement, right? Positive reinforcement is so much nicer and more pleasant than negative reinforcement. When we allow ourselves the time and the space to savor those great and wonderful feelings that come with connection, that come with joy, that come with the things that brighten or lighten our lives, I think that's a really important point to make. So I'm glad you brought that up. For me, like, yes, it is the kind of motivating knowing that where I've been and how far I've come, to give myself that motivation to exist in that uncomfortable space of growth that comes with a new role or a new venture. And to remind myself that it's a process, and with a process, you have to start somewhere. One thing that I do, that I try to do more of, is just really allow myself the time to rest and reflect. And I think that is important for recharging. And also, rest is such an important part of growth, and it's such an important part of life. And so giving myself those moments and days where I do have the day off, and I do allow myself that time to just enjoy spending time with family, or getting out in nature, or watching a feel-good movie or something like that, so that I give myself that time to rest and to not constantly be producing, that I'm not productive, but I'm actually just being. And I think that is something that I could do more of. And I would like to add more to my routine of just taking time in the day where I am just existing and, maybe breathing and allowing myself to just be in the moment. So that is something that I do to tap into what's working, because when we focus on, I'll just speak for myself, when I focus on the present, there's nothing in the present that's, unless there's something like immediate, like someone's attacking me, or something terrible is happening in the present. Yes, then yes. But for the most part, when I tell myself, okay, I'm going to be in the present, what's happening in the present, and I'm asking myself, what are 3 things that I see, or 3 things that I hear, or what am I feeling? What's the temperature? And then when I'm focusing on the present, then I would have to say that most of the time, 9 times out of 10, there's really nothing upsetting happening. And so it allows me to tap into the present and tap into that right now things are okay. And even though I was focusing on the future, I was focusing on the past, and the future was maybe uncertain, or the past was disappointing, if I focus on the present, I know there's really nothing here that's going wrong. It's all going well. So I would then say that there's power in the present. There is power in tapping into the present, because often when we focus on the present, we are tapping into what's going well. Because in the present, there's so much potential in the present. And we do create, and the choices that we make in the present often are, what lay the groundwork for the future as well. So we can create the future in the present, with our choices that we make. So I would then say that the present is a powerful focal point for tapping into what's working. Any thoughts, Eryn?
Yeah, I love your points on rest first and then being in the present, and the importance of rest and how that, helps us have our own renewal with, what might be going well too. And then, like you said, tapping into the present. I love that because that gives us the space to just be. And that's what's so mystical and cool about being human, I guess, is that turning of the page from just being. You don't have to do anything, and yet time keeps flowing, and the seasons keep changing, and you keep changing. And there is something, I feel like, greater leading you to hopefully, a better way of being and living for yourself. So I love this idea of how the seasons and being here in the winter season can be that rest for us, can be that renewal and space for us to just be and then keep living to the future. And I think that might be something I want to try to root into more than being so cerebral about, like, well, if, what's going well? Okay, now I have that down. How do I want to respond to that? That has its place too, but so does just the act of breathing and existing and resting. Those all hold space for those reminders of those positive things in your life or in one's life. And even when I just said that last sentence and switched it from yours to one's, your life versus, my life, when I can focus back inward on my life and the positive gifts I have been given, and I can start to feel that softness, not only within my body, but like within my soul. Like there's this level of getting in sync with myself, the natural seasons, and then some higher power kind of thing. And recognizing that through that triad, that's where I really start to feel that sense of calm that allows me to be, that allows me to be okay with things going well. It's almost hard as a human to be okay with things going well, because I think we are always problem solving or thinking things are not going to go well. I don't know. Yeah, I'd love your feedback on that, L'Shawn. Do you think that is part of human nature for us to, think things are not going to go well? Or actually, I don't know. Let me take a step back here, because in the Clifton Strengths Assessment, positivity is in my top 5. So I always think I have to tamp down my positivity, knowing that. And I'm like, is that just something that, I have grown from my early parts of my career where that did not show up? And now, because I missed it so much there, I just latch on to positivity. I don't know. I'm kind of going off on a tangent here, but just trying to think do we naturally as humans tend toward, things are going well? Or do we naturally tend to, as humans, I don't think things are going that well? And that's what I kind of believe, just from observation, what I have seen, that people tend to be more on things are not going well. So, yeah, L'Shawn, what do you think?
Oh, I am glad that you brought that up, because that's something that kind of piqued my interest when you were talking. And again, it tends to come up, this giving ourselves permission to feel that positive feeling, or to be okay with the way, or to say that things are going well and just leave it at that. Because I think maybe it's American culture. It could be American culture. This sense that we must always be preparing for the worst. We must always be preparing for we have to have a contingency plan. Don't put all your eggs in one basket, that kind of thing. It's a very kind of pessimistic or even realistic way of looking at the world, where you're waiting for the other shoe to drop. It can't all be good. If you look at people who tell their success story, or they're people who are like top athletes, and they're really accomplished actors, and they're, inventors. And there's this undertone of, but it wasn't easy, and they had to sacrifice a lot. And you rarely hear this story of, hey, I was at the right place at the right time. I knew the right people. It was ease and flow. I enjoyed every minute of it. I was enjoying myself. It was great. I was in my element. You don't hear that. You hear all about the strife and, the struggle and the sacrifice, because there's almost like this need or this belief or premise that you have to deserve a good life. And in order to deserve a good life, you have to struggle. You have to fight. You have to sacrifice. It's not okay if you breezed in. That's why we don't like Nepo babies. And we don't like people who, that were born with a silver spoon. We have that is a negative connotation when we say, oh, those Nepo babies. She's just where she is because her dad does this and this and this. Or, so we don't like to hear, I think as Americans, we don't like to hear that someone had it easy. We want to, oh, that person struggled. They deserved it because they fought for it. And if we want to have a healthy life, if we want to have a life where we can enjoy ourselves and just be, then we've got to tear down that paradigm. That paradigm has to shift, and it's very hard to shift that paradigm. There's guilt involved if it comes easy. Oh my gosh, it couldn't have come easy. What could be around the corner that's going to make it hard? Or I couldn't have gotten it that easy. There's that kind of thing that we have. So I think that does make it hard for us to just enjoy the things that we have and to be okay with things going easy in our lives, and, not looking for the sacrifice or the other shoe to drop, that maybe the other shoe won't drop. But for someone, and I think it's kind of ingrained in American culture. I don't know about other cultures. Japanese culture, I know, is very austere, and there is a sense of the Confucianist part of having an austere life, but there isn't that sense that you have to deserve good things to happen to you. But I think it's very much a part of American culture. Eryn, do you have any thoughts on that?
Gosh. I love how you framed that, and I agree. I mean, I initially asked, is this part of the observation of something that I've seen? And then the way that you framed it, I think is so true. And this idea that we could have a different paradigm, right? So, as we continue to root into what's going well in our lives, just holding space and recognizing that there is this societal underlying belief that you have to struggle to get what you want, for instance. And, I think it is time where things are shifting, hopefully. I hope. Who knows? It doesn't feel that way, but I think the time is coming for us to celebrate not only what's going well in our lives, but what's going well in other people's lives too. Even if that means it's going well out of ease and out of comfort. It doesn't have to be uncomfortable. Now, to flip that a little bit, I'd say in my own personal journey and my own personal development, some of my most challenging moments have brought a greater capacity for more joy and for holding space for curiosity and love and those values that I hold. And so, maybe just in my own personal journey, that's what had to happen for me to get there. I don't know, but I do see that side of everything too, and how it can be turned into a way for one to live a good life, a way to root into positivity. And so, some of those challenges that do come up in people's lives, those can be used as a container, as the motivation to move into the life that you really want to live for yourself. So I think that's about all I have to say on the topic. I don't know. Are we close to coaching negative wisdom, or L'Shawn, did you have more you wanted to add too?
No, I think that I feel really complete on this topic. There is just so much, I think, that we take for granted, because I think that evolutionarily we look for the novel. We look for things that are going wrong because, not too long ago that was survival. If you react to movement in the grass and it's just wind, okay, no problem. But if it's a tiger, you saved your life by, reacting and running away. So we do tend, evolutionarily, we do tend towards things that are not going well. We do tend towards novelty. So that means, and I'm just going to throw it out there, that maybe if we tend towards novelty and we tend towards what's kind of abnormal or not going well, then the status quo must then be, perhaps, I'm just putting it out there, positive. And it must then be going well. Because when we focus on the things that aren't going well, then if that one thing isn't going well, the 9 things that are going well, we take for granted. So the majority of the time, we could argue things are going well and things are good. So if we could balance it out and just take time, maybe make it intentional, and this kind of does feel like a coaching nugget of wisdom, doesn't it? Just, take time in your life to intentionally notice the things that are going well. Even if it's just taking the time to write down a gratitude list, like, things that you're grateful for, things that you love about your life. Even if it's just 3 things every day, you just take some time to do that. Or if you're creative, like, Eryn talks about creativity, just, taking the time to express your gratitude or your appreciation for life through art or through poetry or, through whatever, dance. Give yourself that time to recognize and appreciate the things that are going well.
I love that. I think I'd add too, try to release some of the pressure on yourself to feel like you have to love a certain thing, and maybe start from a place of what are you liking in your life right now, or kind of liking, and go from there. It doesn't have to be clear at one end of the spectrum or the other.
Thanks for joining us for Coaching as Benevolence. I'm L'Shawn with Michelle's Sage Place, Positive Intelligence Coaching.
And I'm Eryn with Roots and Wings, Grief and Loss Coaching.
Have a benevolent day.